Okay, so everyone's been talking about burnout lately, like it's just, ugh, I need a bubble bath and a nap. But what if your burnout means you literally can't speak, or can't shower, or can't think straight, and the only thing you can do is stare at a wall and maybe cry sometimes? Well, this video is your deep dive into what burnout actually looks like when you have AuDHD, that's ADHD and autism, versus how it might look for neurotypical folks. Spoiler alert, they're not the same. And when we treat them like they are, it can seriously mess with recovery. So, if you've ever thought, why is this burnout hitting me harder than everyone else? This is for you. So hi, I'm Nicola, your late diagnosed neurofabulous friend. Again with the sound effects. I'm high masking, research nerdy, and I have AuDHD. Now, what's interesting about this particular topic is I actually have 18 years of experience in occupational health and safety. So I've seen burnout from every angle, the legal perspective, the clinical perspective, the workplace perspective, and now it's deeply personal. And I've helped organizations write their policies on it, and I've also had to completely rebuild my own life because of burnout. So yeah, I know burnout. And at the moment, you can see I'm not looking so great. I'm probably mid burnout at the minute because so many sounds. Anyway, let's get started.
Dear Journal, I did too many things and now I need a nap.
Now, if you're into content that is real and validating and science backed and slightly chaotic, but in a good way, hit that subscribe button and also tap the bell because your neuroglorious brain deserves content that actually sees you. All right, let's get started today. And today we're going to set the scene by defining some of the key players in today's conversation: autism, ADHD, and their chaotic but brilliant and deeply misunderstood combo, AuDHD. So, what is autism? Autism or autism spectrum disorder is a neurodevelopmental condition that affects how people perceive, process, and interact with the world. It's not an illness or something to fix, it's just a different operating system. The core traits here include differences in social communication, like struggling with small talk or reading social cues, sensory sensitivities, like being overwhelmed by noise, light, smell, or touch, a need for routine, predictability, deep focus, special interests or fixations that bring intense joy or clarity. Some autistic people are very verbal and independent. Others might be non-speaking or need high support. It's called a spectrum because there's a range of traits, not a scale from mild to severe. All autistic experiences are valid and different. So, autistic burnout is a well documented experience. It typically happens after sustained masking, sensory overload, or navigating a world that's essentially constantly misunderstanding or invalidating your needs. So, symptoms include things like skill loss, like speech or daily tasks, increased sensory sensitivity, emotional shutdown, withdrawal from social contact. And it's not just stress, it's neurological exhaustion from pretending to cope for too long. Now let's talk a little bit about ADHD. What is ADHD? ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It is also a neurodevelopmental condition, but with a totally different flavor. The core traits include inattention or difficulty sustaining focus, forgetfulness, losing things, impulsivity, blurting things out, interrupting emotional intensity, hyperactivity, fidgeting, restlessness, mental busyness. So it doesn't always look externalized, sometimes it's internalized busyness. And ADHD brains are wired for dopamine. They're dopamine seeking, they look for novelty and fast feedback loops, and super creative and intuitive and ideas rich. but struggles with executive functioning, planning, prioritizing, regulating emotions, or doing really boring tasks. So ADHD isn't a lack of attention, it's more like attention dysregulation, either zero or a hyperfocus tunnel. ADHD burnout is often driven by chronic task overwhelm, executive dysfunction, emotional dysregulation, and those constant failures to meet basic expectations. Shame from being misunderstood as lazy or careless. The burnout often shows up as mental paralysis. I can't even start this. Crashing after hyperfocus sprints, forgetting how to do things you normally ace, emotional outbursts or shutdowns. And recovery from ADHD burnout often requires dopamine replenishment, so body doubling, rest, forgiveness. Because the internalized shame is so brutal, it's really important to make sure that we have a safe space for that as well. So now let's talk about the tornado that is AuDHD, the combo platter. AuDHD is when you're both autistic and ADHD. And yes, it's real, and yes, it's different from just autism or just ADHD. And yes, AuDHD burnout deserves its own category. According to recent estimates, up to 50 to 80% of autistic individuals also meet the criteria for ADHD. And despite being so common, it's underdiagnosed, especially in women and marginalized groups. What happens when you're both? You get sensory sensitivities and masking pressure of autism, plus the executive dysfunction and impulse chaos of ADHD. The emotional dysregulation and rejection sensitivity, both conditions carry. When burnout hits, it's not just a need to rest. My brain has gone offline, my body won't cooperate, and I can't pretend to be okay for not even a second more. So let's talk about ADHD burnout. It's unique and overlooked. There's not a lot of research behind it. ADHD burnout essentially equals the autistic burnout and the ADHD burnout and the friction between them. It can look like masking collapse. You can't physically mask anymore. There's no smiling. There's no more eye contact. Executive shutdown. You can't make a plan or even start anything, not even fun things or things you enjoy. Hyperreactivity. Everything is too loud, too much, too hard. You get emotionally flooded very fast. You have skill loss. You forget how to be a person. You might stop talking, stop showering, stop functioning. It's paralysis and pressure. You know you're not meeting expectations, but you're also too depleted to change anything. It's like a circuit board that's fried on both ends. And the recovery, it's not just about cutting back. It requires like radical unmasking, redesigning your environment, being deeply honest about what you can and can't do anymore, and finding spaces that really celebrate that neurodivergence instead of just tolerating it.
Is it a plan? Is it a meltdown in bullet points? Who can say?
So let's now talk a little bit about what we think we know about burnout. The classic run-of-the-mill version, the neurotypical version. This is genuinely what we call neurotypical burnout. That just means burnout experienced by people whose brains are considered neurologically typical, folks who aren't autistic or ADHD. So, definition time. The World Health Organization defines burnout as an occupational phenomenon, not a medical condition. It shows up in three main ways: exhaustion, physical and emotional depletion, mental distance or cynicism, I hate everyone and everything energy, reduced performance, you're showing up, but it's not giving anything. The kind of burnout that usually results from chronic workplace stress that hasn't been managed well. Think unrealistic deadlines, overloaded schedules, lack of support or recognition, feeling trapped in a job with no control or meaning. And according to a study done in 2016, the more mismatched a person is in their work environment in terms of values, workload, fairness, or community, the faster burnout sets in. In 2023, a Gallup study found that 76% of employees experience burnout at least sometimes, and 28% report feeling burnt out very often or always. And the symptoms? Don't these sound familiar? Fatigue that doesn't go away with rest, disconnection from people or tasks, brain fog or poor memory, irritability, feeling like your work doesn't matter. But here's the key thing. For neurotypical people, burnout is usually tied to external factors. Work stress, personal obligations, a toxic boss, and when those pressures reduce, so do the symptoms. Think of it like this. Neurotypical burnout is like a phone battery that drains too fast. You plug it in, it charges back up, and you're mostly good. A weekend away, a new role, some rest, or even a good therapist can fix it. But for neurodivergent folks, that's not always true. The problem isn't just the workload. The problem is living in a world that consistently misaligns with how your brain works. And here's where things get even messier, because neurotypical burnout isn't what it used to be either. We're seeing a shift, both in the research and in lived experiences. In the past 5 years, especially post-pandemic, neurotypical burnout is becoming more chronic, more emotional, more existential. Thanks to remote work, email, we're on our phones, and we're constantly getting notifications. Turns out rest isn't restful anymore. The boundary between on and off is essentially disappearing, which makes burnout stickier and sneakier. People are working longer hours from home without realizing it. They're socially expected to be available 24/7. With no commute to decompress, no visual signals that work has ended. And in 2022, a Deloitte survey said that 77% of professionals said they had experienced burnout in their current role, and nearly half said they didn't feel supported to manage it. So instead of just, I'm tired of this job, people are now saying, I feel numb all the time. Nothing feels meaningful anymore. I can't even enjoy the things I used to love. I'm emotionally flatlined and I don't know how to bounce back. That's a huge deal because now burnout symptoms are starting to resemble depression, anxiety, and even trauma responses. Some researchers are now exploring the overlap between burnout and complex PTSD, especially in high pressure, emotionally demanding jobs like healthcare, education, social work. So as neurotypical burnout becomes more emotional and more physical and more identity-based, it starts to resemble the kind of burnout neurodivergent people have been screaming about for years, which means AuDHD burnout is even harder to spot because now everyone's saying, I feel overwhelmed or I'm not myself anymore. And clinicians are more likely to confuse the two and misdiagnose autistic burnout as depression, anxiety, or generic exhaustion. Neurodivergent people often get lumped into self-care culture when what they really need is systemic change, unmasking, and a rewiring of their entire life. So we're not just talking about a scale of tiredness, we're talking about completely different causes, different brain chemistry, and different recovery timelines. I'm curious to know, what's the most neurotypical burnout thing you've ever seen at work? Bonus points if it involves something like wellness pizza or a 3-minute meditation session in a noisy boardroom. Drop it in the comments. Let's hear what people have seen or what's actually worked. Let's share what's working. That'd be cool.
Like this video and you get one more. Huzzah!
Let's actually talk about AuDHD burnout. That's burnout in people who are both autistic and have ADHD. And if you're thinking, is that a real thing? Yes, research shows that it is now a real thing. Now, AuDHD burnout isn't I'm so tired. It's I'm fundamentally unable to function. And it often looks like skill regression. You might lose access to speech, motor planning, or daily routines, increased sensory overload, sounds, lights, textures feel painful, executive dysfunction, you can't plan, prioritize, or even start basic tasks. So doom scroll away. Shutdowns or withdrawal, you stop engaging with others or isolate completely. And masking becomes impossible. All your coping tools just collapse. So, a couple of defining terms. Executive dysfunction means your brain's management system is off. Starting, stopping, organizing, remembering all become difficult or even impossible. Masking is when neurodivergent people hide their natural behaviors to fit in, suppressing things they do for stimulation, scripting conversations, forcing eye contact. It's all incredibly exhausting. And according to Raymaker in 2020, autistic burnout is defined as a syndrome involving chronic exhaustion, loss of skills, and reduced tolerance to stimulus, distinct from depression and occupational burnout. Circling back to the World Health description of burnout. And this kind of burnout can last months, even years. It's not a weekend off with a couple of Aperol spritz situation. It's often the result of decades of cumulative overload, unmet needs, unacknowledged neurodivergence. And in 2023, a study by Arnold said with 59 autistic adults and asked them to describe their burnout. And they described this as feeling trapped in their own bodies, losing abilities they previously had, a response to chronic social invalidation, its accommodating environments, and relentless masking. In short, AuDHD burnout isn't about stress from doing too much. It's about surviving too long in an environment that was never designed for you. And it's like trying to run a marathon in someone else's shoes on broken concrete while you're pretending to be fine. So, have you ever had that kind of burnout, the full shutdown? What did it look like for you? And let's share and validate each other in the comments because, yeah, it's definitely a thing. And I'm curious to see how other people have felt about it. Let's be that new 59 group of people talking about it. Okay, so if you're listening to this going, ooh, that's what happened to me, have I got something for you? You can download the free workplace toolkit that I've created. It's for managers mainly who are dealing with neurodiverse employees. It's free. Just download it, send it to them. Maybe it helps someone. I don't know. But it kind of helps explain or ask the right questions around advocating for accommodations. And it's designed to be shared with your bosses or co-workers or anyone who needs a gentle but firm wake-up call. Also, because why not check out my merch because it's fun and neurodivergent and comfy as fuck. Because burnout recovery should always include soft clothing. Links in the description.
There's a free thing. Please take it before I roar.
So, why do we keep confusing these types of burnout? Why do people, including therapists, employers, and even ourselves, keep confusing neurotypical and neurodiverse burnout? Because the symptoms look similar on the surface. You have exhaustion, you have got withdrawal, you've got lack of motivation, you've got brain fog, but the causes, experience, and recovery paths are completely different. So let's break it down. For neurotypical burnout, the causes are workload stress, toxic job, or any of the external kind of things. The recovery there is rest, boundaries, vacation, therapy. The duration can be weeks to months. And what helps? Time off, therapy, a new job. Whereas for neurodivergent burnout, the cause is from masking, sensory overload, executive dysfunction, chronic invalidation. The recovery, however, is downtime, unmasking, sensory regulation, lifestyle redesign. The duration can be months to years. And what usually helps? Accommodations, identity affirmation, and community support, which is ideal. Now, one of the biggest reasons people miss AuDHD burnout is masking. We get really good at looking like we're coping until we're not. And when we finally hit the wall, it often gets misdiagnosed as depression, generalized anxiety, borderline personality disorder, or just being dramatic. Which means we often get the wrong support. And you can't fix ADHD burnout with a mindfulness app and a yoga mat. You need structural changes. You need sensory safe spaces, reduced demands, permission to unmask, time, real unpressured time to recover, and maybe most of all, validation that what you're experiencing is real and it's not just you failing at being normal. So let's stop doing that. If you're a clinician or an educator or an employer watching this, know that your awareness literally will change someone's life. And if you're neurodivergent, know this: your burnout is valid. You are not lazy, weak, or overdramatic. You're burnt out from surviving a world that wasn't built for your brain, and that takes courage and it deserves care. So, what can we do when a neurodivergent person is saying they're feeling burnt out? We can get more specific. We can ask better questions, and we can stop assuming that everyone's burnout is created equal. If someone says, I'm burnt out, don't just recommend a bubble bath. Ask, what are your biggest sensory triggers like right now? Are you still masking right now? Are you forgetting how to do basic tasks? Are there tasks I could do for you? Is this coming from work stress or is this survival mode? Burnout isn't universal. It's contextual, it's cultural, and deeply neurological. And we only get better at supporting people when we learn to name what we're really dealing with. So let's talk a little bit about what employers can actually do to help prevent or reduce burnout, not just for neurotypical staff, but also for your neurodivergent employees who are often burning out harder, earlier, and more invisibly. So let's, one, stop confusing well-being with resilience training. For neurotypical employees, yes, resilience workshops, mindfulness apps, and access to EAP services are all useful. But for neurodivergent staff, resilience often just means please keep masking while we do nothing about the actual problem. Instead, focus on removing barriers, not just asking people to endure them better. Two, let's reduce the hidden load of meetings, multitasking, context switching. Many workplaces are now so fast paced and overstimulating and cognitively demanding by default that it's exhausting for everyone, but especially for ADHD and autistic brains. Executive dysfunction and constant task switching equals burnout. So, solutions here are minimize unnecessary meetings, especially spontaneous ones, give clear agendas ahead of time, allow for asynchronous contributions, especially for quieter or processing heavy team members, offer tools to visually manage workload like Kanban boards, task trackers. And then let's normalize and encourage neurodivergent friendly accommodations. Don't wait for someone to crash before offering support. Be proactive. Examples include flexible working hours if possible, or hybrid work, sensory friendly spaces, natural lighting, quiet areas, noise cancelling headphones, written instructions instead of only verbal ones, advance notice for schedule or task changes, allowing stimming, movement breaks, fidget tools, etc. And top tip, include this in onboarding, not just by request. Create a culture where accommodations aren't a burden, they're normal. Address the impact of masking. And masking, obviously, again, is when someone suppresses their natural traits like stimming, needing breaks, or asking a question to appear professional. It's exhausting. It leads directly to burnout, shutdown, and identity confusion. Employers can absolutely model and encourage psychological safety. Start meetings with real check-ins, not, if you're busy, that's a good thing. Don't penalize different communication styles. Say things like, you don't need to explain or perform your neurotype to be included here. Rest is not a reward, it is a right. This one's simple. If your culture frames rest as something you've got to earn through burnout, you're part of the problem. Neurodivergent employees, in particular, need longer recovery windows after social, sensory, or executive effort. Normalize mental health days. Encourage full lunch breaks and time offline. Don't glamorize overwork or being always on, although, and this is important, like me, some neurodivergent employees will actually find work to be their safe place. So I like to overwork because it calms me down, especially as if home is chaotic or overstimulating or full of unpredictable demands. So for those folks, rest might look like autonomy over how they work, clear structure, low stakes routine, being allowed to say no to social extras like team lunches or group calls without feeling awkward about it. The bottom line is, don't assume rest looks the same for everyone. Ask and listen and let people define what recovery actually means for them. Then finally, let's build exit ramps before people crash. Don't wait until someone's in tears or frozen with burnout to ask them if they're okay. Create lightweight feedback channels, weekly anonymous check-ins, pulse surveys with actual follow-ups, open decompression conversations after busy periods, and don't just say, we're listening, act. Even if it's small, even if it's messy, show people they matter before they're gone. So, at the end of the day, you want to reduce burnout. Stop trying to make people fit the culture. Start shaping the culture to fit the humans you hired. That's how you keep people well, creative, and here for the long haul. So, if this video helped you feel seen, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more AuDHD friendly content, and leave a comment with what you want to see me cover next. We're not being over dramatic. We're not just burnt out. We're not broken down. Let's get you the support you deserve. Check the links for downloads. They're free. Did I say free? Because I meant they were free and easy to download. So do that and send it to your boss if you need.